Hi everyone. So I wanted to do a quick sample reading with the Orbifold Tarot just to give some idea of how to read with the deck if you're unfamiliar with it. Because I know several people who are new to the deck may look at it and go, this is really quite challenging. And in many ways it's actually meant to be challenging. It's meant to challenge you and kind of break down the typical ways that you read tarot, so that it can open up new ways to read tarot and hopefully derive deeper meaning from not just the Orbifold itself, but any of the decks that you read with. At the same time, initially, there can be a little bit of a block, a little bit of a confusion, and you run up against, well, I don't have all the things that I'm used to. I don't have people doing things or animals running around or scenes that are evocative of very clear emotions or anything. It's just simple colors and geometry and numbers. So for some people, those are evocative of very clear emotions, but for other people, not so much. So one of the ways to break through that is to let go of the idea that you need to find meaning for each card. And so before you shut off YouTube now, what do you mean let go of meaning for each card? Of course, why would you not use cards? Or why would you use cards if they don't have meanings? Of course they have meanings, but what I mean is letting go of any of the meanings that you've already associated with cards. Not that those meanings aren't there, and you'll maybe see how they come back up. But letting go of those and just looking at how do the shapes flow one to the next, and how do they transform, how do they change from one card to the next. So here we have the Seven of Water, the Page of Water, and the Three of Water. And so one of the first things to notice is, they're all water cards. Not only are they all water cards, but right in the middle, that water is broken up by a seed of earth. So right away you can start to kind of intuit that this situation or this person in the situation is all about water. Well, what does that mean? Water is having to do with reflection and memory, sensation, the subconscious. Usually we associate water with emotions, and certainly emotions are a big part of it, but in addition to emotions are tied to memory and sensation and the subconscious and dreaming. Water is also tied to nurturing and nourishment, cleansing, development, and all of those kind of things, which are also very emotional. So, but it's a bit broader than emotional. So, but this is probably a person who's quite sensitive and fairly emotionally driven in whatever they do, or at least the situation they're inquiring about is one that's high in emotion because there's so much water. Even though the card, the last card, this is a lower number, and the 7 is kind of a middle number, so it's maybe not overwhelming for the person, but the appearance of 3 water cards does indicate that it's a highly emotional situation. Or it's a situation that has a lot to do with the person's subconscious or dreaming mind, has to do with their sensations, maybe the degree that they're being nourished, maybe it's a health concern with that little bit of earth, maybe there is some aspect of self-love and self-nourishment that they're not addressing. So that's kind of a first impression, never mind any of the specific cards, but that's just a first impression from what's the overall element and what's the overall flow of the 3 cards interrupted by this abundance of water plus a little bit of earth. So moving a little bit further than that, one thing that struck me that I noticed was this 3 shape is repeated in the 7 of water twice. So it's kind of as though the 7 card is a 3 of water on one side and then another 3 of water on the other side, joined together by another sphere of water in the middle. So what that could indicate, 3s are largely about change, and so it could indicate that the person's a little bit torn between an emotional choice, a choice that the person has to make between one aspect of change that's going to change their life or change their perception of life. Because that's the other thing about water, is water is about perceptions too. If it's related to dreams and the unconscious and all of that, it's also about perception. So it could be a choice between 2 matters that they're equally emotionally invested in. And both of those are going to represent or instigate a certain amount of change for that person. And so that may be difficult for them to let go of, because one change is fine, or the other change might be fine, or making the choice, but making the choice between them is difficult. So there's something in between that's kind of tearing the person. Maybe one choice is going to cause a feeling of depression or a negative emotional reaction, and one is going to cause a more positive reaction. So that could be represented by the upward-facing triangle of 3 versus the downward-facing triangle of 3, and joined by that middle sphere. The middle sphere could be the person themselves. Then in the middle, kind of from that field of water, from that field of emotional material, we have this single sphere of earth emerging. And so the earth is about physicality, and the material world. It also has to do with experience and the present. It has to do with being and resting in yourself. The settling that happens in your body and in your mind, in your being, really. The settling that happens when emotions kind of start to also settle and dissipate. If you can think of like the way sediment settles at the bottom of a lake, that's what I see this earth, bit of earth being here. It's kind of representing that maybe the person needs to settle the emotions and let the earth aspect reveal itself before they can make the decision, because their decision is too emotionally tied before they can actually go anywhere with it. So they need to sit with it a bit and let the emotion kind of dissipate and clarify a little bit. So the water's not so muddy anymore. Let the sediment settle to the bottom, and then from that ground, from that being, as the sediment settles, then the person's going to be more able to make a decision between these 2 situations that are going to cause change and that are going to be emotionally tied. One maybe having a positive outcome, one maybe having a negative outcome, but through that settling, once the settling happens, the decision is going to be clearer. And when that clarity comes, the decision that is made is going to be a more positive result, the upward-facing triangle. That doesn't necessarily give any indication, especially because this is a theoretical person. It wasn't a reading for me, it wasn't a reading for someone in particular, it was just 3 cards that I drew as a theoretical exercise. But so it doesn't necessarily give the person any indication as to which choice to make, but it is indicating that the choice will become clear within themselves once they let the emotions dissipate and settle. And in many ways, so often clients come for tarot readings because they want an answer. They want someone to tell them, well, what should I do? And that can be useful. There's certainly a place for that. Otherwise, we probably would have a much smaller industry than it already is of tarot readings. But often it's also more helpful to the querent for them to find their own answer, and that the cards are just a reflection of what's going on for them, and in seeing that reflection and maybe being led through that reflection by the reader, the answer becomes clearer to them, and they come to their own conclusion, they come to their own answer. And that's much more powerful for the person that is being read than a reader just telling them what to do. It's more empowering for them, and it's going to have a larger impact. Now, of course, there's a certain kind of client who would be disappointed by that. They would say, well, they didn't tell me anything I didn't know already. No, that's true. They didn't tell you anything that you didn't know. But you didn't know you knew until it was revealed through the process of the reading. And so that's not necessarily the way you have to, that's philosophy on how I read. That's not necessarily anything unique to the Orbifold, but I find that the Orbifold, because that's already my style to begin with for reading, I find that the Orbifold lends itself really well to that style of reading, where as the interpreter, the reader helps reveal the sitter's, the querent's inherent knowledge, inherent wisdom already within them. It just clarifies things. So that's one way of reading that series. And if you subscribe to more pictorial systems, probably the more pictorial system, again, talks about choice in the Seven of Cups. And talks about having a conversation with the deeper self in the Page of Cups. And then talks about celebration and fulfillment and happiness in the Three of Cups. So we got there in a very similar way, or we got to a similar result, but just in a very different way. So I'll try to upload some more examples of reading with the Orbifold, just to start getting a handle, help you getting a handle on how to read with the deck.